They thought she was just another quiet face in a uniform, too young, too soft-spoken, too female to be feared. But when General Halston demanded her call sign, and she calmly said, "Phantom 1," the entire room of elite SEALs went silent. This isn't just a story about a female soldier in the ranks. This is about what happens when a myth becomes real, when the name whispered in the shadows steps into the light. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just remember her name. You'll never forget what she did. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode will leave you absolutely speechless. Let's get started. The air inside the dusty command tent at Firebase Echo Ridge was thick with tension and sand. For weeks, patrols had vanished in the winding gorges of northern Kunar, never heard from again. Ambushes sprung like traps in the dark, and those who returned came back bleeding, eyes haunted. Boots echoed against the plywood floor, slow, steady, purposeful. Captain Olivia Mercer stepped into the room, slender, calm, not a wrinkle in her uniform. She looked more like a librarian than the woman Marines had been whispering about for months. At the map table, a few SEALs smirked, leaning back in their chairs, their eyes full of doubt. "That's her," one of them muttered. "No way." Another scoffed. "She's just a captain. She doesn't look like someone who crawled out of hell." But across the tent, General Richard Halston straightened, his chest lined with decades of war, ribbons faded by time. He didn't believe in rumors. He believed in results. And right now, he was looking at a woman who didn't look like results, not at first glance. But something in the room shifted, quietly, like the breath before a storm. General Halston hated ghosts. Ghosts made men believe in things they couldn't control. And legends got soldiers killed. He stared at Captain Olivia Mercer from across the operations table, the dusty maps crinkling under his fingertips. Around him, SEALs leaned in, their smirk still hanging but not as wide. Marines shuffled papers, glanced her way, half curious, half unconvinced. She looked ordinary, too young, too quiet, too clean. "You," Halston barked, voice sharp enough to stop time. "Step forward." Captain Mercer did not flinch. She stepped into the center of the tent like it was the most natural thing in the world, her boots barely making a sound. The silence was so thick it pressed against the chest. One SEAL scratched his jaw nervously. Another lowered his gaze. Halston stepped closer. "Name, unit." "Captain Olivia Mercer, 17th Recon." Her voice was calm, perfectly measured, no stutter, no hesitation, no sign she even noticed the eyes drilling into her. It only made the general angrier. He'd heard the stories. He'd dismissed them. A ghost in Kunar, a sniper who moved like mist, a woman who walked out of kill zones with her entire team intact. But this wasn't a ghost. This was flesh and blood. He leaned forward. "Not good enough," he said. "Low and dangerous, call sign." It was like dropping a grenade in the middle of the tent. Chairs creaked, a corporal inhaled too sharply, and for one long, suspended heartbeat, no one moved. Captain Mercer didn't blink. She didn't smirk. She didn't square up. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, just enough to meet the general's stare. Her hands stayed still at her sides, but her eyes, they held something ancient. "Phantom 1, 2 words, spoken with no pride, no arrogance, just fact. You ever see a room lose its soul all at once? That's what happened." The smirks vanished, the doubts collapsed, and the silence that followed wasn't uncertain, it was respectful. General Halston said nothing, but his face, for just a split second, twitched. He had seen the name before, not in official reports, but in classified scraps. Whispers passed through secure channels, half-redacted documents stamped unverified. But now, the ghost had a voice, a face, a name. Behind Mercer, a SEAL shifted, his jaw clenched. One of his teammates, the one who had laughed loudest, was now sitting rigid, both hands on his knees like he was in church. Across the room, a young lieutenant turned pale. He'd read something about an alley in Darband, where two snipers had everyone pinned until some shadow had cleared the roof by herself. He hadn't believed it then, but now he knew. General Halston's voice, when it returned, was quieter. "Phantom 1, he repeated, like the name had weight on his tongue. Iron, dust, blood. Marines who doubted her looked away. SEALs sat straighter. The temperature in the tent hadn't changed, but somehow, everyone felt colder. Mercer didn't gloat. She didn't nod. She simply stood there, like she had been here before. And maybe she had... The general crossed his arms, eyes narrowed like rifle sights. "You understand what you've just done, Captain?" "Yes, sir." "Legends break men," he said, flat and grim. "Soldiers will expect you to be invincible now. If you fall, they'll fall with me." She finished. The general stared at her, hard, long, then something shifted, not much, but enough. Respect, reluctant, but real. "No pressure," he muttered. That got a few exhales, maybe even a ghost of a chuckle. But no one was really laughing. Not anymore. Mercer didn't say another word. She didn't have to. She'd spoken the name. And in that tent, packed with warriors who had doubted her just minutes before, Phantom 1 didn't sound like a call sign anymore. It sounded like a promise. The flap of the command tent snapped open like a whip. A young lieutenant stormed in, face pale, a folder clutched tight under his arm. He didn't speak at first, just laid the file in front of General Halston and took a sharp step back, like the paper itself carried bad news. Halston opened it. His eyes moved fast, jaw tightening with each line. "Recon Bravo's gone dark," he said flatly. The room shifted. "Last contact was 20 minutes ago. Northeast ridge outside Kunar. No comms, no movement, high chance of ambush." It was all he needed to say. Silence hit the tent like a slap. No one needed a map to know what that meant. In this region, no contact meant surrounded. It meant time was bleeding out. Halston's gaze swept the room. Then it landed on Mercer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Captain Mercer, you're on point." That was it. The test, not of leadership, not of command, of legend. A few SEALs traded glances. A Marine shifted uneasily. She hadn't even been assigned to Bravo. This wasn't her team. But no one questioned the order. Not now. Not after hearing her name. Mercer gave a single nod. "Yes, sir." She adjusted the strap of her rifle, her motions fluid, practiced. The room stirred behind her boots scraping, gear clinking, men falling into formation. They weren't sure what to expect. They weren't sure she was real, but they wanted to believe. Outside, the Kunar night breathed dust and cold silence. The city glowed faint in the distance, but the outskirts were shadows and jagged walls, where sound carried too well and death waited around corners. The convoy rolled out under red light, engines muffled, tires chewing gravel like bone. Inside the armored truck, no one spoke. Mercer sat by the hatch, helmet tilted slightly, eyes closed. To anyone watching, she looked calm, but she wasn't praying. She was remembering. The alley patterns, the choke points, where snipers usually perched. She mapped it all again in her mind, one slow breath at a time. When they reached the outskirts, Halston's voice came over comms calm, clipped, "Phantom 1, lead them in." Mercer opened her eyes. The transformation was subtle, but you could feel it, like frost turning to steel. She signaled forward. Boots hit dirt, rifles raised. The buildings loomed like tombstones. Then a single bark echoed in the distance. And silence. The SEAL beside her muttered, "Feels like a trap." Mercer didn't answer. She raised a hand. "Halt." Her eyes scanned the rooftops, the windows, the shadows that felt too still. And then she felt it, that shift in the air, that sensation, like a predator watching from above. "Positions," she said into the mic, barely louder than a whisper. And then the world exploded. A crack of rifle fire shattered the silence. A Marine dropped hit in the leg. Shouts rang out as bullets rained from every direction: rooftops, broken windows, side alleys. The city lit up like it had been waiting. "Sniper left rooftop top right," someone screamed. The team dove for cover. Dust swirled, rounds pinged off stone, shredded crates, ripped sandbags apart. The ambush had teeth. But Mercer didn't collapse into the chaos. She pressed her back to a broken wall, her breath steady, her eyes scanning the chaos like a mapmaker reading terrain. There, a damaged wall, cracked just enough to climb, a route to the high ground. While others fired blindly, she moved. "Cover me." It was all she said, no fear, no flare. The team shifted fire, giving her a sliver of space. She darted out, boots pounding dirt, then she climbed hand over hand, pulling herself up with grit and muscle memory. Bullets hissed past, close enough to part her hair, but she didn't stop. She rolled onto the rooftop silent and rose behind the first sniper team. One shot, precise. The threat dropped. Then she moved again. A shadow in motion. She slipped from roof to roof like the city gave her passage. Each squeeze of her trigger opened a new path below. Each shot turned chaos into clarity. On the ground, a SEAL looked up just in time to see her silhouette through the smoke. "Holy hell," he whispered. "She's clearing them." One by one, the fire above stopped, and below, the team surged. Push left. Go rifles cracked as they advanced, dragging the wounded, crossing gaps that would have meant death just minutes ago. Mercer kept moving, never rushed, never wasted a bullet. When the last rooftop went quiet, she climbed down the broken wall, dust in her hair, rifle still hot. She said nothing. She didn't need to. One SEAL just stared, then muttered what everyone else was thinking. That's not a story. That's real. The convoy rolled back into Firebase Echo Ridge under the pale wash of floodlights, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to every uniform. Dust caked their faces. Blood streaked the sleeves of medics as they rushed toward the injured. But no one was dead. Not one. That alone was a miracle. And in every miracle, people search for the reason. Tonight, the reason walked quietly across the tarmac. Captain Olivia Mercer moved like she always did, calm, steady, silent. She wasn't limping. She didn't look exhausted. She didn't wear the weight of what just happened on her face. But those who had been there, they felt it pressing down on them like gravity. They watched her with something deeper than awe, respect, reverence, maybe even fear. Inside the operations tent, the atmosphere had changed. Gone were the sideways glances and smirks. The SEALs who had once leaned back with folded arms now stood straight along the wall, as if instinct reminded them they were in the presence of something bigger than themselves. Marines, some barely out of boot camp, stood taller, like they were afraid even their breath might break the silence. And then the plywood floor creaked. Mercer stepped into the tent. The shift was immediate. No one spoke, no one dared. General Halston stood at the head of the table, arms folded, jaw set, his ribbons catching the low light. But this time, when he looked at her, there was no challenge in his eyes, only clarity. He had seen enough. "Phantom 1, he said, slowly. The call sign no longer a question or a taunt. It was a declaration. You kept every man alive tonight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't deliver a speech. He didn't need to. He just gave her a nod, small, barely visible. But from a man like Halston, it was louder than applause. And it meant more than medals. It meant you were right, and I was wrong. A few SEALs shifted behind her. One of them, the same one who had scoffed earlier that day, looked down at his boots like they'd betrayed him. The mocking tone was gone. Now, he just looked humbled. Another SEAL, older, with salt and pepper stubble, cleared his throat, stepped forward. He didn't speak, just extended a hand. Mercer looked at it for a second, then shook it, firm, silent, mutual. and something invisible snapped into place. The legend wasn't just a whisper anymore. It had shape and boots and a steady hand on a trigger. Halston watched it all in silence. He'd spent his life watching reputations swell too fast. He'd buried too many soldiers crushed under the weight of expectations they could never carry. And yet, he looked at Mercer and didn't see the signs of a bluff. No puffed chest, no need for validation. Just that same expression, calm, focused, like she'd already left the room in her mind and was scanning rooftops again. He studied her the way he studied terrain looking for cracks. He found none. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He let down the edge in his voice. "You know what they're going to expect from you now," he said. Mercer didn't blink. "Yes, sir." "They'll think you can't fall." "They'll be wrong," she replied. "But I won't fall today." It wasn't bravado, it was truth, and it landed in the room like thunder. A young Marine, barely 19, watched from the back corner. He'd heard the name Phantom 1 whispered on comms before this deployment. He thought it was a joke, a ghost story. Now, standing a few feet from her, his throat tightened. He found himself gripping the edge of his helmet, fingers tracing the empty plastic like it meant something. Tomorrow, he'd carved 2 letters into it, P1. Not for luck, but to remind himself real courage doesn't yell at moves. That night, word spread like fire across the outpost. They didn't shout her name. They didn't chant. They whispered it, like it deserved silence. In the mess hall, in the barracks, at midnight, guard change. Her name slipped between tired lips like a prayer. Phantom 1. 2 days later, the knock on the steel door wasn't loud, but it was urgent. Captain Olivia Mercer looked up from the cleaning cloth in her hands. She'd been sitting alone near the back of the barracks, field stripping her rifle by memory, the way some people folded prayers. The knocking came again, faster this time. Before she could answer, the door creaked open and the young lieutenant, same pale face from before, stepped in, eyes wide and voice a little too fast. "Ma'am, the general needs to see you. Now?" She stood instantly, no hesitation, no questions. When Mercer entered the command tent again, it wasn't filled with disbelief or whispers. This time, it was silent, waiting. Halston stood alone at the table, no SEALs, no officers, just him, a satellite map, and the kind of stare that didn't blink. "Captain Mercer," he said, "not Phantom 1, not you." It was subtle, but it mattered. "Come here." She stepped forward, eyes already scanning the map. The 11th Recon Team was en route to establish overwatch near Ridgepoint Delta. Halston began. It was supposed to be a 4-hour movement, in and out, no contact, clean op. Mercer stayed silent. She knew what was coming. She'd heard this setup before. "They missed 2 check-ins," he continued. "We sent a drone up 5 hours ago. Spotted one of their Humvees flipped, burned out, no signs of movement." He didn't look at her when he said the next part. "Enemy chatter's picking up in the sector. We think they're alive, but we don't think they'll stay that way for long." Silence. Then he lifted his eyes, and this time there was no command in his voice, just something harder, something rare, respect. "I can send another squad," he said. "Standard response protocol. Or," he paused, "I can give you full command. Pick your team, run it your way. No oversight, no micromanaging, just get them home." For a long moment, Mercer didn't speak. She stared at the map, the ridgelines, the choke points, the open ground. It was worse than Kabul. Wider exposure, no alley cover, elevation everywhere, an ambush site made by the devil himself. But the question wasn't how bad. The question was, could she do it? And that answer had already formed inside her. Not because she was fearless, not because she was some invincible shadow, but because she had made a silent promise that night: as long as they come home, the name is worth it. She looked up. "I'll need 4 from the 9th, Harris, Bellamy, Cruz, and Darnell. Done. And I want Petty Officer Shaw from the SEALs." Halston raised an eyebrow. "Shaw's a wild card." Mercer didn't blink. "He sees what others don't. I need that. Another pause, then Halston nodded. You move at 0200, no air support, no drones. If they're alive, we don't risk giving away their position. Understood. He didn't ask if she needed time to prep. He knew better. As she turned to leave, he spoke one last time quietly, but with a gravity that felt heavier than orders. They won't believe you're coming, not until they see it with their own eyes. Mercer paused at the flap of the tent. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. They'll believe, she said, and stepped out into the cold. That night, while most of the base slept, 5 soldiers gathered behind the motor pool. No fanfare, no gear checks repeated 3 times, just nods, packs, rifles, eyes that had seen too much and still chose to go anyway. Petty Officer Shaw tightened his vest and looked at Mercer. You ever think they send you into the fire because you don't come back burned? She pulled her hood low over her eyes. No, she said softly. They send me in because I bring people out. The convoy didn't rumble. It slid into the dark, red lights flickering like dying embers as they left the safety of Echo Ridge behind. Somewhere out there, 11 soldiers were either praying or already past the point of hope. But something moved through the hills that night. Not a rumor, not a shadow. A promise. Phantom 1 was coming. The mountains didn't welcome them. They never did. The road wound like a cracked spine along the ridges of Kunar. One wrong turn away from a fall, no man would survive. The night was colder here, heavier, as if the wind carried not just dust, but memory. Inside the lead vehicle, Olivia Mercer sat behind the driver, staring into the black. Her rifle lay across her lap, untouched since they left Echo Ridge. She didn't need to check it. She already knew its weight by heart. Behind her, the team was silent. Even Shaw, usually quick with sharp words, had gone quiet. They could all feel it. This wasn't just a mission. This was a line in the sand. Somewhere out there, another squad, brothers, friends. Kids barely past 20 were either barely holding on or already gone. And if Olivia didn't reach them in time, the legend wouldn't matter. She knew that. She always had. As the vehicle slowed to a crawl near a burned-out village, Mercer raised a closed fist. The convoy stopped. No sound except the engine ticking. She stepped out first. The cold air bit into her neck. The silence wasn't clean. It was waiting. She crouched near a broken wall, her fingers tracing the disturbed dust too recent to be wind. She scanned the rooftops, the corners where barrels might peek out, where shadows pretended to sleep. Harris, Darnell. Push left, Cruz and Bellamy. Take high ground. Shaw, you're with me. Her voice was low, precise. It didn't command like thunder. It guided like a compass. They moved without question, and it hit her. In that moment, they weren't following the uniform anymore. They were following her. Not the myth, not the call sign. Her judgment, her eyes, her steadiness when others shook. It was terrifying, and it was beautiful. Halfway through the village, movement flashed in the corner of her eye, a shape darting between collapsed huts. Mercer raised her hand. Contact. But she didn't fire. She listened. The shape moved again, this time slower, staggered. She nodded at Shaw, then moved forward, crouching, weaving between debris until she reached what had once been a water trough. A groan, then a whisper. Don't shoot. She turned. And there he was, Private Langford, barely conscious, his shoulders soaked in blood, fingers gripping a broken radio. She dropped to one knee. Where's the rest? She whispered. Langford blinked hard, held up, farmhouse in the northeast corner, ambush, every exit's watched. His voice cracked, but Mercer had already pressed a hand over his wound. You did good, she said softly. Rest. We've got it from here. And for a flicker, he smiled, then passed out. Shaw appeared behind her, already reading her expression. They're boxed in. Not for long, she replied. What followed wasn't just a rescue, it was surgical. Under Mercer's direction, they didn't charge, they cut. One sniper post here, one machine gun nest there, each taken down with quiet precision, as if the night itself bent around her team. Mercer climbed to a rooftop on her own, crawled belly down across broken tiles until she could see the rear of the farmhouse. And there they were, 6 of the missing soldiers, holed up behind shattered walls, faces bruised, ammo low, eyes wide with disbelief when they spotted her silhouette in the dark. She raised a hand, waited, then moved. One by one, she peeled the ambush open from the outside, clearing escape paths, eliminating overwatch, giving the trapped Marines a window. And when the last fire team pushed through that broken doorway, dragging the wounded and returning fire, she dropped beside them, rifle hot, her eyes scanning every shadow. "Fall in," she barked. They followed without question. By the time they reached the extraction point, not a single man had been lost. Not one. Later that night, as the medics worked and the rescued men were finally able to breathe, Mercer sat alone outside the medical tent. Her gloves were off. Her hands trembled just slightly. Not from fear, from release. She stared up at the stars overhead. Same stars as the ones over Echo Ridge. Same ones she'd stared at as a young recruit, wondering if she'd ever be more than just a shadow in someone else's squad. Now she was the shadow, and somehow the light too. Shaw walked over, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one without a word. After a moment, he spoke. "You know, they're not whispering anymore," he said. "They're saying it out loud now." She gave a quiet smile. "That a good thing?" "Not sure," he replied, "but it's real." She took a sip. The coffee was burnt and bitter. It tasted like every deployment. But it also tasted like something else, responsibility. She hadn't chosen to become a symbol, but if others were willing to follow her into fire, she'd keep walking. The base was different when they returned. It wasn't the lighting, or the people, or the guard rotation. It was something quieter, something heavier. As the convoy pulled through the outer gate, Boots scrambled to the perimeter not out of protocol, but out of something that resembled reverence. They weren't waiting for orders, they were waiting for her. Captain Olivia Mercer stepped down from the lead vehicle, her rifle slung loosely, dust clinging to her uniform like smoke from the fire she'd just walked through. Behind her, 11 rescued soldiers followed, some limping, some holding bandaged arms, but all alive. And that made everything different. No cheers, no salute lines, just silence and wide eyes. The kind of silence you hear when people are recalculating everything they thought they knew. Inside the operations tent, General Halston stood waiting. He didn't pace, he didn't brief, he waited. And when Mercer entered, when her boots touched the same plywood floor where they had once laughed at her, the entire room stiffened. Not because they were told to, but because they had to. There was something about the way she carried herself now. Same steps, same posture, but different weight. She didn't look taller, but she felt taller. Halston stepped forward. For a second, he didn't speak. He just looked, not at her medals, not at her uniform, but at her, like he was seeing her really for the first time. And then, he did something that no one in that tent expected, something that made even the oldest SEALs raise their eyebrows. He saluted first, sharp, precise, with intention. The room held its breath. Mercer blinked once, then returned it, equally sharp, nothing more, nothing less. And in that quiet exchange, something unspoken passed between them. Not approval, not forgiveness, not even pride, but recognition. Halston finally spoke. "You brought them home." Mercer nodded once. "Yes, sir." "0 casualties." "Yes, sir." He looked down for a moment, as if considering something deeper than words. "When I first heard your name, I thought it was smoke." He said, "A shadow someone made up to make sense of impossible things." He looked back up, but I was wrong. He didn't say it loud, but everyone heard it. He turned to the others in the room. "From this point forward," he said, "when the impossible needs doing, we don't wait for backup." He nodded toward Mercer. "We send her." No one clapped, no one cheered. They just stood there, like they'd just watched history etch itself in real time. That night, as the base quieted and the stars returned to their watchful positions over the Kunar sky, Mercer found herself alone again, back on the sandbag wall near the barracks. Same spot, same rifle, same night wind brushing past her collar. But everything had changed. She didn't crave the whispers. She didn't carry the legend like a flag. She just remembered the faces, Langford's broken voice, Bellamy's hand gripping hers as they climbed out of hell. The way Shaw had looked at her after it was all over, not like a myth, but like a leader. She wiped down the barrel of her rifle with the same cloth she always used. Not because it was dirty, but because the ritual mattered. Behind her, footsteps approached. It was Shaw. He didn't say anything at first. He just dropped a folded scrap of paper on the wall beside her and turned to leave. She unfolded it. Inside was a hand-drawn patch. Crude, sketched in pencil, but unmistakable. Peen. Under it, she doesn't walk on water. She walks through fire. Mercer stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully, slid it into the inside pocket of her jacket. Not as proof, not as praise, but as a reminder. The legend of Phantom One had never been about a name. It was about what you do when no one else can. When the call comes through and there's no backup. When the lives of people you don't even know rest in the space between your next breath and your next decision. And when you go anyway, especially when you go anyway. In war, names become numbers, orders blur into echoes, and most people move through it hoping only to survive. But every now and then, someone walks into the fire not to fight for glory, but to make sure others survive. Olivia Mercer. Phantom One never asked to be a legend. She never chased medals or recognition. Her strength wasn't in her trigger finger. It was in her resolve. When others waited for orders, she moved. When others whispered fear, she listened for the moment to act. Her story teaches us this: leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. Courage isn't the absence of fear. And respect isn't demanded, it's earned, breath by breath, choice by choice. You don't have to be a soldier to live with that kind of quiet conviction. You just have to decide that when someone needs you, you show up. Every time.